欢迎各位同学们观看区块链学习营第5讲以太坊的多样性。在数字经济转型的过程中，区块链技术由于其不可篡改、时间戳、可溯源的特性被定义为驱动改变未来数字社会的重要力量。本次区块链学习营是区块链应用创新大赛组委会为选手提供的系列课程。本届大赛由中国信息协会主办，中国信息协会教育分会、嗨看文化传媒有限公司、中软国际教育集团以太坊行星承办。在课程进行过程中，同学们如果有问题，可以把问题打在公屏上，在讨论环节，我们会抽取优秀问题，并向老师进行提问。被抽中的同学将会获得未来科技9月刊的杂志。Okay, good evening, everyone. Let's welcome to join our today's lecture. Let's welcome our speaker, Ken, who is the fellow of Israel Foundation. Okay, well, Ken, you can share your screen now.
And I studied medicine at university. I studied biology. But where that path led me was sort of, I've always wanted to work on activism, social impact, and really helping people, which is why I wanted to be a doctor. But what really kind of led me kind of down this path is realizing that, I don't have money. When you're in social activism, when you're, on the ground and you're out there, protesting or, practicing your right to talk about the values and sort of the different struggles and fighting for progress. You start to realize that there's a very tight-knit community that, cares about different parts of the function for activism. And for my path, what I quickly realized is that there are people who just don't care about money at all, which is amazing, and there are people who have the fortunate resources to do this without needing to worry about finances. Unfortunately for me, I was not in that situation. I have to get a job, pay for my student loans, and go to medical school. That's the one I wanted to do, just be a doctor. So my plan was, work in finance. Let's make as much money as possible, and let's apply to medical school, become a doctor, and help change the world. Or at least that was my dream. What ended up happening was, working in the middle market consulting. Part of that really kind of opened my eyes to what the banks do. What does traditional finance look like? And luckily at the same time, blockchain really started becoming one of the up and coming technologies for banks to look at. So I had a lot of exposure through there. Part of that was working and kind of working with a lot of the consensus mesh people, helping them start their blockchain for social impact coalition. And a lot of that allowed me to sort of meet many, many different people who are doing amazing things. One of those people is Aya Miyaguchi, who at the time was at Kraken. And, a couple of years down the line, we remained friends, and, she was, she ended up becoming the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation, where she still is now. I think she's an amazing person. And so when that first started happening, I pretty much begged her, and maybe we remember this differently, but I remember begging her to let me into the Ethereum Foundation. I said, let me volunteer for anything. And finally she relented. And so that's how it all started. And about, I think February 2018, a lot of it was coming in, trying to see, where I can be helpful. That was in operations or anything as little as like scheduling interviews to helping the grants program, which is where I sort of found a little bit of a niche, helping to work on running the operations behind grants, and it's been an amazing ride doing that for the ecosystem, kick off the scholars program, helping with community events. It has been, a lot of things, and I'm super grateful for all of that. But why am I here today to talk to you all? I want to talk about who Ethereum is. What is Ethereum? What is this community, and sort of what are all the different, crazy details we have. So to start it off, Ethereum is, it's an open source protocol. Right? It is blockchain. It is a public blockchain. It's open source software. What Ethereum is not is it is not the Ethereum Foundation. The Ethereum Foundation and Ethereum are not the same. There's no master node. There's no one central entity that creates everything for Ethereum. All of those things are not true. Vitalik, who is the one of the founders of Ethereum, is not the king of Ethereum. There's no one person that decides the future of Ethereum. Inherently, all the Ethereum Foundation is a grant making and research organization. We help fund research, and we also conduct research internally. We help do other things. There's a client team, Geth, that helps to, which is Go Ethereum, which helps to maintain the network, maintain one of the clients in the network. But ultimately, Ethereum is grassroots. Ethereum is something that is owned and run by the entire community. The thing that kind of holds it all together is the idea that Ethereum has these values. At least I think so. The Ethereum community is not one that has any sort of official value. There's no top down, this is what Ethereum means. It's really been sort of a labor of love from all the community members. It's been a group effort in establishing what Ethereum can do, and sort of a lot of discovering and building for what Ethereum can and could be for the ecosystem and really kind of the rest of the world from that perspective. From what we've observed, we've found a lot about what we as a community hold valuable, right? It's not necessarily one that is always true, but it is something that I think a lot of the community embodies. We seek to build for intention and not attention. We hope and we want to collaborate. We don't want competition, right? It's not necessarily that we're going against each other. It's that we can all build together. Everything is composable. We hope to value add to each other, and we don't value capture. And we'll dive into all of these values in a little bit. How do I go back? Okay. Right, yeah. So inherent in our community values is this open source software and development nature. This is a vastly different environment because the community is not a company. There's no central organization, as I mentioned before. The community is all of us who are building on Ethereum, whether you're an engineer or you're someone like myself in operations, kind of being the janitor in some cases. But what's really kind of important here is that the community is and has the sense of agency and responsibility, right? Everyone who is involved, it feels like they are a part of all of it. And so if the community ever feels as though someone were irresponsible with money or treating someone, one of their employees, or even treating others in the organization or cross-functional across other organizations, across the community, treating them poorly, they will call you out. And that's what I love about this community. It's that there's no idea that there is this top-down hierarchy where someone can't say something to someone else, obviously within reason. You don't want to say anything that is offensive, but there are codes of conduct that help us sort of implicitly have this etiquette where we can talk amongst each other and look at each other as equals. everyone expects transparency, much like the rest of the blockchain space, right? The technology itself is transparent, and so are the operations behind all of this, right? If someone were to do something, the community expects them to be transparent about how they make that decision, why they came to that conclusion. And these are all discussions. It's never a, ad hominem attack. It is a conversation about, let's try to understand these views and let's try to keep an open mind for all of this. And within the development and the core development of Ethereum, I think the open source developers, the core developers, the engineers, all of them do thankless jobs, right? A lot of times they don't get the credit they deserve, but this is where you build for intention and not attention, right? No one's building here for clout. No one's building here to live in a notorious infamy. People are building because the technology itself means something, and hopefully in the future this does more than just DeFi and just NFTs. We hope to actually have this be the long-standing and dominant financial system in the future. Building off of that, Ethereum is grassroots, right? So individuals are empowered. Individuals have agency. Communities have agency. For larger companies, as I mentioned before, like Amazon and Apple, there are hierarchies. There are, top-down approaches to what this is. We can talk about other different organizations that are U-shaped, but there is a hierarchy. For this, there's less of a structural hierarchy. For platforms building open source blockchain tech like Ethereum, everything is out in the open. Everything is collaborative. If you look at the Ethereum 2, the ETH2 building, there are multiple client teams. There are some researchers from the Ethereum Foundation that help to project manage and help organize and do independent research, but everything is open. All the call notes are open. All the calls are open. You can even join the calls. Participation is for anyone who is interested. And the thing is, there's no ego about it. There's no, I was here first. There's no idea that, your academic credentials, make you better than someone else. This is genuine interest and sort of genuinely wanting to build something that's greater than the existing structure. If you look at the protocol research and development teams, coordination is done via the research level, not an organization. So looking at sort of all the different functions, I guess on the research side for what exactly is helping to build Ethereum, you have ZKP research, so zero knowledge proofs. You have the ETH core development. You have L2 scaling, so layer 2 scalability problems. And you have DeFi security. There's so many different facets of what this community is and what it can be. And currently, there's way more than just these four. But with the current structures, if you look at kind of who's doing what, here you have Tim Dako, who previously was at Consensus, helping one of the client teams, and is now helping really kind of shepherd a lot of the core devs coordination through EIPs, which are Ethereum improvement proposals, and really helping to get people to converse better, to have better and more functional discourse. If you look at the next two, you have Steven and you have Proto Lambda. There's a lot of anons, a lot of anonymous people within blockchain, which is good, privacy preserving. You have Steven who does Arbitrum, and you have Proto who just joined, just left the Ethereum Foundation to join Optimism, which these are two different L2s on optimistic rollups for Ethereum. It's amazing to see sort of two different teams building two different structures off the same basis for optimistic rollups. Ultimately, it's up to the community to decide what dApps want to use either or both scaling solutions. The idea is that you have resiliency, you have redundancy, and you don't kind of have any sort of king-making to say this is the only way to do it, because that's not the case, you know. At the bottom, you have 3 DeFi security. I mean, I guess they're not more than just DeFi security. They are all around security researchers, protocol researchers. You have James Prestwich over here in the middle. You have Sam Sun, who writes his infamous security white hat blog posts, which really feel like movies at times. You have Brian Eisenbach over here on the right, who has really been kind of working on building frameworks for security for the last 3-4 years, and each one has their own sort of different approaches, and I think that is really what adds to the ecosystem. There's no idea that one is better than the other, or like we have to beat someone else. We're all kind of building, and for the security researchers especially, everything is agnostic. You want to help whatever teams are possible, and this is the beauty of white hat hacking as well. It's so available, so accessible. If you have an interest, you can jump in. So now let's look at public goods and private property. When you're building open source, Ethereum and sort of the backbone of the infrastructure that runs it is all open source. And as I mentioned before and alluded to with the security researchers, all these teams and all these projects are open to help. There's no idea that there's only one way to become a core developer or to be a protocol developer. All the GitHubs are open. There are so many times where we've had really amazing team members join whether it's a Ethereum Foundation or another protocol team or a scalability team, just by simple pull requests. Let me fix your grammar errors, your syntax errors, your typos. Let me clean up your code. And that's all it takes to get started. All of these public repos are open, and I think that's sort of where I'm so enthusiastic about Ethereum, is that the ladder is rolled down, and there's low-hanging fruit everywhere. The barrier to adoption, the barrier to participate is almost negligible for someone who wants to do it. One of the things that I've learned in activism and something that's always stuck with me is the idea that there's a role for everyone, no matter what that job is. There is something where there is something where someone can help out, whether it's little or huge. Not everyone needs to be a Vitalik, not everyone needs to be a protocol developer, but if I can find my niche, I'm sure anyone else can. Part of that is being able to participate in community events. Part of that is being able to just find the right things. But community events are really where we sort of all come together, and even this is there's no central entity that helps organize events. There is literally everyone, everything, and anyone who wants to do their own can do their own. There are community events that are hosted by different grassroots organizations around the world. We have ETH Planet here in China. We have Ethereum CN, ECN, also here in China. We have ETH Global, which founded by fellow Canadians. And they host events all around the world. We have ETH India, which is focused on India. All of these are independent organizations. There's no idea that one has to stick to another, or ETH Global can do an event with ETH India in India, which they've done before. ETH Planet, ECN both exist harmoniously in China, and all of these can all exist at once. There's never a shortage of events to go to. There are meetups, there are conferences, there are hackathons, even something like this that the Ethereum Foundation is more than happy to support. The idea is that as you create these as others create these events, what we can do best is help to signal boost, is to provide bounties and provide opportunities for more people to participate. Sometimes it's not necessarily the financial aspect of being able to provide a bounty or provide a prize. A lot of times it's really the option, giving that opportunity for anyone, whether it's a student or PhD, researcher. There are so many opportunities, far-reaching, and definitely so many different access points to get there, all around the world. All it takes is just a little bit of searching, and you can find opportunities all around. The other thing that I think is so beautiful about the industry is not necessarily just having these touch points, but having different people. If there are things you don't understand and there are ways you want to participate but just don't know where to go, this to me has been the most accessible community, whether it's knowledge base or even expertise. You have the PhDs if that's what you're looking for. But all of it is right within your fingertips. You can join a Discord, the ETH R&D Discord, where you have all of the Ethereum researchers just sitting there waiting to answer your questions. Obviously they're working on their stuff, but they're happy to answer the questions, and that's what makes this so much fun, is that all of these people are available, much smarter than me. If you get on Twitter, there's a whole crypto Twitter dedicated to actual open source development, and other security things, right? There are all these stories about how someone can be involved or how someone can participate in Telegram channels, right? There's an ETH security Telegram channel where almost weekly, someone posts an Etherscan address and says, "Is this being exploited right now?" And everyone jumps in together. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. People will jump in and try to figure out, what happened. It's almost like a spy investigation every week. Reddit is completely open. There are so many different subreddits that talk about it. If you don't know where to start, it can be overwhelming. You can always go to ethereum.org and find these resources available. Support will always be available. You just need to ask for it. And I know that sometimes is the hardest part is who do we ask? Or I'm afraid to ask someone. And I've been in that position as well. What I found to be most helpful is literally just finding someone who's already in and say, "Hey, can you help me out?" And that's all it takes. You can ask me now that I'm here. One of the main things that we do at the Ethereum Foundation is run this thing called the Ecosystem Support Program, or ESP. It is the grant-making arm of the Ethereum Foundation. But we don't call it the grants program anymore because we've realized that financial support is not the only thing. It's not everything that people need. It's actually probably the least asked for thing that people need. Sometimes money can help, but oftentimes it really is more about connections. It's more about getting exposure. It's more about actually having access to the opportunities. And so we had a change in terms of what the name meant, because one of the things that we really hold true to ourselves is we don't just want to ask ourselves, is this something that we want to help? We want to actually switch that a little bit and be more proactive in terms of how we do offer this support. How do we actually say yes? Instead of saying, should the Ethereum Foundation help you? It should be, how can the Ethereum Foundation help you? And all the support is really different, right? There are a lot of teams that are, just getting started and really just need validation. What is this project, you're working on? Does this have likes to run? Sometimes it just takes that one person to tell you, yes, this is a great idea. Please keep going. That's how my blockchain journey started. I went to a hackathon much like this, where I knew very little, just conceptually what blockchain was. And it was actually John Wolpert, who's now at Consensus, but back then he was at IBM, working on the Watson blockchain team, who told me, this is a great idea, you should keep going. And since then, I have not looked back. Other times, it's really kind of understanding, who else is building this thing, and can I help them? Or I've hit this problem. I can't integrate this library, or I don't know how this SDK works. What can I do? ESP is here to help you, right? We can send you to the right people. We can literally send you to the person who created the library. And oftentimes it happens a lot, where we send them to to Rickmu, who created Ethers.js, and literally ask that person, how did you do this, or why did you do this? It is really so accessible in that manner, but really we exist to help support anyone and everyone who comes to the door, in whatever way that we can. As this happens for us, no matter how big or small that support ask is, it helps us to build our roster of ecosystem needs, right? It helps us to really kind of mentally map, where is the Ethereum ecosystem now? How do we best help people? And can we create, knowledge bases, resources that, are readily available to kind of just jump in without needing to kind of jump on a 30-minute call to run through it? This helps us really build a list of resources that we can just open source and give to everyone else. So all of this is really helping grow the ecosystem in different ways that, you might not know now, but for us, all of these questions are really helpful, and it continues to kind of add to this existing sort of mind share that's available, and you can find it all on ethereum.org. So that's it. I just wanted to kind of share my take on the ecosystem, sort of a broad ecosystem view of the Ethereum community, development, and all the access points that are available, all the different people who are building different things. But thank you all for having me. Thank you all for listening to me rant for 30 minutes. But I appreciate every single one of you for building. Please follow us on Twitter, EF_ESP, which is the Ecosystem Support Program Twitter account. And if you have any questions, feel more than free to email me at ken@ethereum.org. And I think that's it. Yep, that's all.
Okay, 非常感谢 Ken 的分享。Ken, thank you so much for giving us such wonderful speech. Now we have some questions for you about the blockchain. And I will read those questions first using Chinese, and then I will repeat it again using English. And my colleague will also paste the question to the chat window, and you can solve the question as well. Okay, so the first question is, how can blockchain be applied to the risk control in finance field?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in terms of use cases, I think, risk sort of manifests itself in different ways. And so when we talk about, corporate risk, we talk about financial risk, there are many different ways of sort of looking at it. From public blockchain perspective, risk is most available, or risk is most accessible when we talk about transparency in terms of risk. When we talk about lending and corporate extended corporate trust. This is where I think risk is in one way, it can be mitigated through extensions of corporate trust. But that sort of availability is only there for larger firms or things with existing histories. This allows risk to be disintermediated and given to individuals or those smaller organizations that don't necessarily have the JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley backing or that's available. When we talk about individual financial risk, a lot of the opportunities, if you think about lending and borrowing, that's a lot more obfuscated than sort of what's available now. And so, or it is a lot more obfuscated in its current state than sort of what the current DeFi system allows, which is giving something that's open for individuals to borrow and loan with one another. And so it's not necessarily risk control per se, but it allows for the open sourcing of sort of the financial primitives that are available. And I think that's really where the benefit lies when we talk about sort of agency and sort of understanding.
Thank you. So, 第二个问题是，区块链已经诞生了几十年了，请问老师，第二个问题是，目前以太坊的性能与 Cybermails 相比还有很多不足，在支持高性能运算方面还有很多不足，要如何弥补这些不足？在商业应用方面还要做出哪些努力？ So the second question is, compared with Cybermails, Ethereum could not support efficiency computing. How could they make up for this deficiency, and what effort need to make in the commercial application?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what Cybermiles is, but I'm looking it up right now. I assume this is about scalability, because generally that's sort of what people talk about when we talk about not being able to have efficient or effective I guess computing. It's I think one of the common fallacies is that you need to have 72,000 transactions per second the same way that Visa does, and I think that's just not the case, right? Most times you can run complete organizations without needing to do 72,000 transactions per second. I think that's actually at a scale where you're not actually maxing out databases every single time. For Ethereum specifically, when we talk about public blockchains, what you're talking about is the efficiency of having completely disintermediated financial systems or payment systems in general. When you settle on chain, you don't need, again, 72,000 transactions. We do have scalability options where you have side chains like a Polygon, and you also have layer 2 solutions like Optimism and Arbitrum, which are not at 72,000, but you have up to 1,500 transactions per second, which is way more than enough. We're talking about batch transactions with ZK rollups. You can do way more than that. You can do hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, which again, you don't necessarily need that. But batching transactions and settling on main chain is really where you're going to have these, these massive sort of, I guess, quote unquote, like TPS improvements. But I think it's sort of missing the point of why public blockchains are necessary, right? You want public blockchains because you want the transparency. You want the ability to sort of like have this composable code that anyone can sort of build on. Having something a little bit more niche, and again, I don't know what Cybermiles is, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a this versus that. I think there are different use cases for many different blockchains. One of the things that I continue to remember is what Vitalik has told me. I always thought we need to have like this blockchain needs to win. And what Vitalik said was, that doesn't matter. In the future, in 10 years, what we want to see is that blockchain is the technology that people use. What we're fighting for is that Ethereum is something that people do use if blockchain does exist in 10 years. We are fighting a battle of this versus that before any blockchain exists in sort of mainstream applications. So I don't know, but I'll look up Cybermiles after this, and I think in the future, let's just make sure that blockchain is something that exists. Let's make sure that large companies and larger financial rails are using blockchain technology, regardless of it's Ethereum or if it's Cybermiles.
Yeah. OK，thank you。第三个问题是，区块链已经在中国推行了，已经诞生了10几年了。请问老师认为，在中国的推广障碍有哪些？就现在的区块链应用来说，中国市场已经有哪些比较成熟的区块链应用技术了？ So the third question is, blockchain has been born for more than 10 years, and what are the like the bottleneck for to promote the blockchain in China, and in terms of current application, what are the mutual application of blockchain technology in Chinese market? What's your opinion about this?
Yeah, that's a very hard question. Yeah, that's a very hard question. So there's two different ways of looking at it, right? There's blockchain technology as something that companies can use, which we talked about before, which is scalability and sort of like the different kind of options of many different blockchains. But I think more importantly, it's the idea of whether or not people want, and especially companies, large companies, whether or not you want this to be open and transparent. I think one of the biggest barriers to, at least speaking from my side of the US and our healthcare systems, it doesn't benefit business to be transparent. It actually is way more beneficial and way more profitable to not be open and transparent. When we look at sort of building these systems, potentially, yes, it can be more efficient when you're cutting things out. But ultimately, the switching cost, the technical debt, all of these other things are so much greater. And sort of the question is it worth the investment to sort of do this now? Even my question before, right? Like, is blockchain something that's going to exist in 10 years? We don't know, right? Looking at Bitcoin from 2008 to where we are now, has that much changed? Have we really kind of adopted Bitcoin as sort of some financial system? Yes, there's some global country adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender. And maybe that's the use case we end up being, or hopefully not. Hopefully there is more that's built on it. But I can't help but look at sort of where NFTs are today, helping smaller artists really get recognition for the work that they've been doing. Looking at DeFi, looking at borrowing, lending, being able to provide mortgages and loans for people who have no credit history, who have no idea that they can do this, and fundamentally understanding the financial primitives of using DeFi for something that is not just yield farming, but being able to use this as income. Looking at Axie Infinity as a game that's play to earn. That is the source of income for many people in Southeast Asia and the Philippines, right? And it's sort of beautiful to see, there's so many opportunities available. So, what is going to, infiltrate the Chinese market? What's going to increase adoption? I don't have an answer for that. But I do hope that, there is a future where, Chinese market, the US market, European market, there is blockchain that helps to run the infrastructure for whether it's finance or supply chain. I think the people deserve to have more eyes and sort of more transparency into these systems and better understand why these regulations exist, why these companies exist the way that they do, and sort of understanding, why your bank gives you a 0.01% savings interest rate rather than something, in DeFi, which is more meaningful, like a 20% or 10%, right? Maybe we can sort of understand, why all of these trade-offs exist.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, 下一个问题是，如果想基于区块链平台开发一个知识产权交易系统，包括一些知识产权确权认证等，现在基于区块链的健全，现在有没有一些比较实际的开发手段？ So the next question is regarding developing intelligent property trading system based on blockchain, including intelligent intellectual property rights conforming or something else. So do you have any suggestion on how to implement it from the technical aspect?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think intellectual property is one of those things that are very at least in today's system it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense, right? So you have IP, you have patents, you have trademarks where if someone beats you to it, they kind of have a claim to it. Can blockchains fix this? Sort of and sort of not. I think where blockchains can be helpful is really kind of showing the different access controls of patents and the trademarks that are the licensing of different trademarks, right? Is blockchain able to create programmatically a way to sort of grant different permissioning, grant different licensing, and be able to automate a lot of these processes? I think that's where we can be most helpful. It's being able to provide the ability to create these structures and these organizations in a decentralized manner. Doesn't require a centralized office to say that like this is the only way to access a patent or to be able to create a patent. I think being able to open that whole system up and being able to talk about things of like giving royalties and paying people back for letting you use a license, or just even the idea that like you don't know if someone's violating your license, but this way at least it makes it open for someone to see, hey, I'm going to use your code, is this okay? I'm going to use it in this manner. So in terms of an actual kind of like implementation, I don't know if there is a current system that's active right now, or at least I'm not sure if I know any companies that are actively working on this. But there's Ujo Music, which was working on royalties for music, and that's not patents, but it is a different form of IP, right? It's music, it's content.
Yeah,
that allows you to sort of create royalties and stuff. Yeah, and that allows you to kind of do exactly that, right? It allows you to give more equity in terms of royalties, in terms of rights to music. If I create, actually, Halik Mall is a dancehall artist who just sold his music as NFTs. He's able to raise money and not have to go through a record label. And so now the record label doesn't have to control, or doesn't have to give up control of his music to a record label. He can actually do it all himself. He owns all of it himself. And if he wants to do remixes or if he wants to do whatever, he personally can reach out to someone and say, hey, let's do this and let's split, whatever profits we make on this music together. And I think that's sort of the beauty of it. And all of this is using public Ethereum. You don't need a consortium blockchain for this. You don't need a private chain. It's actually better as a public chain because then people can know where to go or can know how to use it and can give all these things back without, there's no need to kind of, hide anything, right? You want this to be open. I think this is what builds that better system. So check that out. I'll type it in the chat.
Wow, that's very brilliant answer, I think. Yeah. So next question. 如何看待共享经济模式？认为未来这个有前景吗？在 GitHub 以开源项目为中心，每个开发者根据代码贡献量发 token， 日后开源项目变现后，根据大家持有的 token 来分享现金收益。这种模式在法律上是否有问题？发展前景如何？如果每个开源项目都需要自己来发布 token， 是否需要采用并行链技术？ Okay, so next question is about the sharing economy. So what is your opinion about sharing economy and building a platform that is based on GitHub, and the token will be issued to each developer based on their code contribution. So when the code project makes incomes, we can share earning based on the tokens. Is there any legal problem with this platform, and what is the development aspect? If each open source project needs to issue its own token, whether the chance technology is neat or not. Polynomial. Oh, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I think I probably is he. Yeah, he pastes the question in the chat.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think with something like this, you know, I love the sharing economy. First of all, I think it's you know that leads to, I think, the best sort of the incentives with amongst collaborators, and especially amongst decentralized coordination. Building a platform based on GitHub and tokens being issued to each developer, I think is, you know, it's great. You know, I think a lot of times there's not an equitable sort of amount of building. I don't think it should only be code contribution. I think there are other people who are able to kind of edit code and able to help without necessarily, you know, only being an engineer. But I do think that when it comes to actually building this together, you know, this makes it a lot easier. And if you look at something like a Radical, you know, they have their own token, but the idea there is to be able to provide code contributors funds based on their equitable contribution to any sort of open source project. It's not locked into each project has their own token. It's actually one token for all projects. So anyone can sort of jump in and say, hey, I've done this, but I've also done that. It also leads to something that's more similar to like you know, an on-chain resume of like, look at everything that I've helped contribute code to, look at all the tokens that I got from, you know, XYZ project. There's another project called Committable. Also, they're based in China. They're also working on something similar where they actually generate an NFT for the different code that you've contributed based on, you know, where the code base was at before and where you are now. And so, you know, there's many different ways of actually helping with that. The legal problems in the platform, I don't think there's like any legal problems per se. It's mainly on the licensing for the code itself. That's really where the I guess, you know, problems would be, aside from any sort of, you know, token questions. But thinking about this, I think, you know, how do you make sure that the licensing and the permissioning is widely available for anyone to sort of jump in? Or, you know, do you want this to be closed source? Do you want this to be something that is a permissive license where someone needs to do, you know, some set of conditions before they can actually contribute code here? Yeah, I don't think each one needs to do their own code. I think that actually fragments the market, but if they do, I think that's fine too, right? You know, you have Uniswap, you have SushiSwap, you have all these different ways to actually trade amongst each other. That doesn't really matter what chain you want to build it on. I think ultimately you want to build it where, you know, you have the best sort of intentions to grow, as opposed to building something specifically just to make money. I think that doesn't lead you to the best code contributions, doesn't lead to building sort of the best open organization. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you're looking for people who are building for the right reasons and not just building for money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the next question is, 下一个问题是如何看待 NFT？ 我们国内做 NFT 垂直领域的机会多吗？建议技术框架怎么来设计，怎么来建设 NFT 平台？ So the next question is, what's your opinion of NFT? Is there any opportunity for developing a virtual field of NFT in China?
Yes, I think that would be really cool. Yeah, I don't think it needs to be just, you know, yeah, I think NFTs allow for, you know, the metaverse, which means that anyone in the world who wants to be a part of this universe of physical, virtual ecosystem can jump in. I don't think it needs to only be China. It doesn't need to only be Europe. Doesn't need to only be US. I think the ability to be on a public blockchain for NFTs allows everyone to participate together. And I think especially in China, there's so many opportunities to sort of grow that into a larger world, right? Like, you know, what does this open sandbox look like if in China you're able to jump into a classroom in the US or vice versa, right? What does it look like if I were to jump into Beida or Tsinghua University, right? Like there's so many different ways to participate in this ecosystem. Do I have a recommendation how to design it? Not really. I think you want to plug into where there's a lot of people. You want to plug into where there's existing sort of network of growing individuals who want to be a part of this. And I think most of the NFT projects right now are built on Ethereum, which gives us that sort of moat for developers and applications. But in the future, it's the big metaverse where I think it will be an open sort of cross-chain, cross-world infrastructure. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you're building on Ethereum or another chain. But I do think that right now there's probably the most amount of resources on Ethereum to show you how to build NFTs. If you go to eth.build, there's a great talk by Austin Griffith, and I think Planet actually translated this talk into Chinese. If you want to learn how to launch your own NFT project, if you want to learn how to build on crypto boxes, which is on Ethereum as well, there are great tutorials to be able to plug into this metaverse already. You could probably do it in the next 30 to 45 minutes if you watch these videos. So I think in terms of access, in terms of resources, Ethereum is probably the easiest way to jump in. But if you want to build on another blockchain, that's totally fine as well. Just know that there are available options out there, and there are resources if you do want to learn.
Okay, so thank you. 下一个问题是，现在量子计算的发展日新月异，量子计算能够对传统的区块链技术加密进行破解。请问区块链应该如何发展，以应对于量子计算的飞速发展？ So the next question is a little bit tough. So nowadays the development of quantum computing, it has changed sharply. So quantum computing will be able to break the incorporation of traditional blockchain. So what kind of development blockchain should have to deal with this kind of problems?
This is a question I get asked a lot. So, by the time quantum computing gets here in a place where we are breaking public blockchains, I think if that's what we're doing with quantum computing, I think we're probably not doing quantum computing right. I think we can be doing a lot higher impact things on quantum computing than breaking blockchains. But ultimately, encryption and decryption will continue to grow. That space of public key cryptography will continue to grow. I don't think that this is like a credible fear. I think this is sort of like non sequitur for, the growth of blockchains. To say that there might be a problem in an unknown future that potentially can break this seems like you're afraid of the future. And so I don't know. I think that's a problem that we can worry about later. But there are many things that are happening in terms of shareable consensus mechanism and in terms of pluggable consensus and sort of different encryption methods. So I'm really not too worried about this. I think if the pace at which public key cryptography or cryptography in general is growing, I don't think that quantum computing is going to be a credible threat for just breaking blockchains, right? It's also extremely expensive. You're not going to have a random person just jump in and be like, I'm going to break Bitcoin today. It'll take a lot more than that. So I'm not too worried. It is a great question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that. So the last question is, 目前来讲，区块链技术需要应用在医院患者的数据加密方面，所以这有怎样的优势和阻碍呢？ So if blockchain needs to be applied in the encryption of patients' data, so what kind of advantage and disadvantage it will have?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So when we look at healthcare data, especially for patient data, this stuff should already be encrypted, right? You know, you
Yeah.
don't want someone to go to a hospital and say like, can I look at this person's file? Can I look at your mother or your father's health data? You want this to be private and you want it to be secure. I think what the advantage will be is in terms of public key encryption is being able to have your own data. I'd much rather have my healthcare data on my phone. So like if I'm able to go to whatever hospital I want and show them on my phone, this is my healthcare and this is my history. I'd rather have that than go to one hospital, have an emergency, go to a different hospital, and that hospital saying, I don't have any of your data. I can't operate on you or I can't help you until I get your information from another hospital. I think that actually is the biggest disadvantage of current systems where we don't have portable information. Where blockchain, I think, can be extremely, extremely important, especially for public chains, is being able to provide that portability, not just on healthcare data, but also financial data. I don't want to give different banks the same data so many times. And even, other things like my identity, right? I don't want my ID to sort of just be on all these different systems where their systems can be hacked, and then I don't know if who has my data, who has access to all this stuff. I'd much rather the encryption be on my side where I can give permission to other people to see it and not hold it. I think that is the biggest advantage over the current system where you don't really have access to this. If someone's system, if a company's corporate system, gets hacked or gets exploited or whatever, maybe their password is just password, which has happened many times before, where a large company, their password is literally a password. Their information gets stolen, and then what? Then you're in trouble for something that's not your fault.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest disadvantage is existing in the current system just because it's convenient. I think the new system will be so much more advantageous and even more convenient if you're able to hold all of that data by yourself and you're able to encrypt and decrypt it as you please and grant the permissions as you please. It's a very good question. I think this is really important. I think data sovereignty is one of the top things that we should be worrying about.
Yeah. So thank you for today's lecture, and thank you for asking us some those questions. So we will still have lots of very good questions from our audience. So we will collect it and email you or something. We can have our audience to keep asking us questions.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, anything. My email is ken@ethereum.org. Feel free to just email me. I'm super excited.
Okay, thank you. 感谢同学们今天的踊跃提出的问题，我们还会继续收集同学们的问题，然后我们会把收集好的问题来对我们的讲者进行提问。今天的学习营第5期新年课到此结束，大家再见。Okay, thank you for giving us such a great lecture today. So today's lecture, I think, is done. We are finished.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye.